All right. Welcome back to Off the Wire, the podcast that helps you curb cybersecurity risk and tackle technology challenges. We're here, Anthony and Tanner, two IT executives leading medium-sized companies with about 35 years in experience in IT and cybersecurity. And today we got a special guest, and I think Anthony's going to introduce him.
Yeah, so I saw Patrick the first time at the cyber conference this year, and anyways, was very taken back. He was talking about the mental health in the industry, and it personally resonated with me, and it's something that I've never seen it at any of the conferences I've attended. And anyways, I thought it was a great topic, and I think it's something I would like our listeners to hear and kind of for you to talk about. If you don't mind, I was just thinking, so one of the things that kind of spoke to me was you talking about just growing up and having issues reading.
Yes.
I was wondering if you don't mind just kind of take us through that and discuss that, because I think that's something that's pretty important as well.
Yeah. I really struggled. And as I mentioned to some individuals earlier today, the fact that I'm even doing cybersecurity and I'm able to do these talks, and now there's a book, that's in the works coming out. That was never really going to be possible. I was in remedial reading in second grade. I was in remedial reading in seventh grade. I had to take remedial courses again as a junior in high school. I had to take 6 months of remedial before I went to college. It was primarily around reading, especially in the younger years. There was just a whole lot of stuff going on in my life at the time that it made it very difficult for me to sort of grasp information, because there's just so much other things that were in my head. But fortunately, I had some really great teachers that worked with me, but I'll remember the most important thing that happened. I was in Mobile, Alabama, and I went into this bookstore. I don't remember the name, but it's on Airport Boulevard by the Krispy Kreme. And I went in, and I can remember all that, but not the name. It might have been like Books A Million, probably something like that.
Yeah.
So I'd watched the Top Gun movies like most of us did, my age as a kid, and I was fascinated with it. And when I went through a door, there was this book called Wingman, and you can find them. They're like on eBay and stuff, but it has this photo of an F-16 on it and this guy flying it, and I was so just enthralled in that whole thing. And so I bought the first book. It was like $3 or $4, I think, something like that. And I was so bought in by the material that it made me want to just learn and apply and read and try to get to the other side of it. And I got through the first one, and I went and did some more work with azaleas, because I was working azalea nurseries when I was like 5.
Yeah.
I was carrying buckets to cars and stuff like that. And I remembered I'd finally made enough money from doing that to go and buy the next book. So I don't think we were like 7 or 8 books later, and it just really caught on. I fell behind again, things that were just going on in my personal life that just made it very difficult, when I went to school to be able to focus. And fortunately, just obviously by God's good graces, it wasn't mine, I made it to the other side.
Yeah. One thing, this is a story I heard actually when I was going to college. There was a business class. It was about leadership, but I was very fortunate to have this class. But we had I can't tell the story very well, but the main gist of it was we had a gentleman that came in. His parents were sharecroppers, and like when the landowner would come in, like his parents taught him to look down, like to never look anyone in the face. This gentleman was a CEO at this point, speaking with us. I heard you talk about something or you mentioned it briefly, but can you kind of elaborate on, you never would achieve, to be able to do cybersecurity, or I know you talked about it in your previous thing, but what was that like, and like how do you think you overcame that?
I've never tried to answer it that way. But I can give a quick backstory of why I felt that way. Obviously, I wasn't very good in school. And there were, and cybersecurity wasn't a thing yet. It was, but even the idea of it was so much farther than what I ever thought I would get to do. So struggling in school, I'm up in North Georgia at the time, and there's just not a lot of options, when I grew up. Like, you were going to work for the government, or you were going to go mow the grass, or you might do some oil changes. Maybe if somebody worked with you, you could be a journeyman and electrician.
Yeah.
But like the concept of getting into IT or getting into cybersecurity or any of the things I've done, it just wasn't really in the cards.
Yeah.
I remember, and I've been very careful of respecting the living, but I remember there was this person that I ran into, and oh man, I idolized him. Like, he was a U.S. Marine. He went to Iraq. The first round, he was really smart, and he had so much charisma, and with the lack of people that I really had around me to look up to, especially like going and doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just enthralled, with this person. However, I'd finally found my way into hacking, and I wasn't doing like the good kind.
Oh, okay.
I gotten connected to the internet, and I was just, for some reason, I was naturally good at that. And I remember this person. I was on a phone call with him, and he said, you're never going to succeed. I'm going to have a record, and you will too, but mine is going to be for meritorious service, and yours is going to be for going to prison. And then there was a event that took place with some family members where they kind of sat around, and this was right before Y2K. I've been in the industry for like 2 years. So I was really, maybe 3 years. So I was really finding my feet. And I wasn't hacking at night and getting into trouble. But they sat around and they said, well, when Y2K is over, he won't be doing this anymore. Like, he'll be back in the kitchen.
Yeah.
He'll be back, behind the dumpster doing drugs. And they never really took the time to put someone like me behind the dumpster doing drugs to begin with, right? So a lot of people could take that different ways. Some could say, well, this is going to be the story. Like, this is it. Your family, not your whole family, but these people, and especially this person that you really look up to, just said you'll never be anything. And you could say, well, I guess you're right. But for some reason, it created this enormous amount of just pure spite.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I could put it differently, but I can't. I was just so angry. Like, I was so hurt. It was, I'd gone through some really, really hard times growing up as a child. And, I struggled at everything but playing drums. So I was a good drummer. And here I am, I've got 2 years. I've done something really, really good, something I never thought was possible. And this one person just completely threw me away. So yeah, I felt like a bit of a broken toy, right? To where, the one where if you went to the DFACS and the children's service office and you got the kids on the floor playing and the parents are in the back with the social worker, and the only thing they get is like the dump truck that's missing a wheel. I definitely felt like the dump truck without the wheel. And so I was never able to turn that spite off. And I didn't make a lot of good decisions in my 20s. Like, I had a lot of fuel. I had a lot of desire, but I hadn't really reconciled all the things from the past. So, I'm moving forward, but I'm also pulling myself back. And as I moved forward and I would do things that were successful, I would immediately marginalize them. And so that's kind of how that went about. And just, hard work just paid off. But it was like my entire first company was driven entirely off of spite.
Yeah. When do you, this is just me being curious, when do you think that, I'm assuming you're not operating off of spite now.
No.
When do you think that turned over to where you are now? And is there something you think in your life, is there an event in your life?
Yeah, there is. There are a few. It's kind of like the analogy that I used at the talk, where if you want to redirect a stream of water, you can't just put one bucket load of dirt, because the water knows where it wants to go, and it's going to wash that first bucket load of dirt away. Like, you have to go every single day, and you have to pack more dirt, and you have to pack more dirt. Otherwise, the water knows where it wants to go, whether it's the way it should go or not. So there were several situations that were basically the equivalent of going and packing dirt and trying to reroute water. I know it's going to sound cliche, but honestly, my wife had a lot to do with it. She was very, Virginia was very non-judgmental. And she had known me when we were a kid. So when I started to talk about some of the things that were going on, things started to make sense to her. Like, okay, that's how, all right, that's why he was that way, right? So having someone there to talk to that I could just kind of go through it. The other thing was just being dedicated to the regimen of, these are things you can't listen to anymore. Like, this is music you can't listen to. Like, these are things you can't drink anymore. You have to take pills on time every single night. Like, I'm part of this group, and I don't know if they want to be on this podcast or not, so I won't. But, they meet at the conferences and they all get beers together. Well, I was at a past conference and they got, together at 10 o'clock to drink beer. Well, I can't drink beer at 10 o'clock. I have to take my pills at 9. It's a dedication once you go through everything. And some things, some of the harder stuff, you just have to work through it. You have to work through what happened. You have to work through what it does to you internally when it comes around. You have to understand the triggers that take you back, much like PTSD in a soldier, right? And then you have to learn the triggers that make you better. And it's delicate. It's very, I feel very jealous of someone that can just get up and they're good.
Yeah.
My life isn't that way. But, going through that process, journaling did help me. It's actually not terribly frou-frou, but just writing something down, just it gets it out of you. I also had to understand that I would never have ordinary outcomes because I didn't have an ordinary life. I had a great mom and a great stepdad, and I had a sister, and we're very and we love each other, but we almost want to kill each other too. But there's all the other evil. There's all the things that's even hard to talk about now. And you just have to make peace that you're not going to have ordinary outcomes if you never had an ordinary beginning. Everything's going to be extraordinary. And you just have to figure out how you're going to work with it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I mean, it sounds like it's a struggle, and I can honestly relate. I'm one of those people where I'll say this. I can buy one beer and drink it, but I can't be around a bunch of alcohol. It took me a long time of growing up, and honestly, meeting the right woman, my wife had a huge impact. But anyways, I appreciate you sharing that, because all that stuff, you're not gonna flip a switch overnight and be better, if ever.
No, you're not. And you also have to understand there are things that you're going to be able to change, and there are things that you're not. So I can make peace with some of the trauma. It's okay. It's gone, and help. Even some of the people are gone now. But each morning, I get up and the scars are still here. And I actually wear a watch over some of the cigarette burns that were put on my wrist, and every day when I get up, I see those, and so I can't escape that. And there are scars that are also inside of me that I'm not going to be able to just wish them away. However, there's a lot of strength in the scars. The scars remind me that you lived through it. Like, you're still here. The scars that I have inside me, they help me empathize with people that, are going through what I went through, like, now. Like working with the Children's Haven and the foster kids and being able to look at those kids and say, you're in hell right now. But you're going to be okay. Like, you're going to get to the other side, and actually you aren't alone. You feel like you are, and you feel betrayed. And in some ways you were, but for every scar, there's a story, and those stories, you can decide how you want to finish them. The individuals that scarred me had an idea of how this story was going to end. And this story did not end with me being able to be here today and do the things that I do. I wrote my own story.
Yeah.
So.
All right. I appreciate you sharing that. I think it'd be good to kind of move over onto you being, you're CEO of 2 companies and got employees.
Yeah.
And are you at the conference? You spoke about quite a few things. Why don't you tell us on why don't you talk to us about the emotional health of your employees and what you see and how you speak with them to address that or to mitigate it?
Yeah. So that's changed over the years. I've not always been perfect at that. Startups are hard. Building companies is hard. It's stressful. It's grueling. My wife tells me that, I would never ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do, but I hold myself to a very high standard and very high expectations. So, what I learned from mistakes and from really good mentoring was that if you want a team to be really effective and go quicker, you actually have to slow them down. You have to make sure that they rest. There's kind of this false idea that, if you really want to be brilliant, that you just go wide open. That's not really how it works. Making sure that you're resting your team, making sure that they have time. Something else I do is forced PTO. And this is quite controversial. I don't do unlimited PTO. Now, I will let someone go take extra time because they need to take extra time. But the problem with unlimited PTO is you don't define what you're going to hold someone to.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about, I'm going to make sure you only get 2 weeks. I'm talking about you're going to take 2 weeks or you're going to take a month. If you do unlimited PTO, I just found that how do you ensure that your people are taking those breaks? We roll over some of our PTO, like 5 days out of every year, but you have to use that time. If you won't take PTO, I'll turn off your VPN connection, I'll turn off your OWA, and I'll redirect your mail with a forwarder. But you're not coming to work.
It sounds like you've had to do that. I'm assuming,
Yes,
is that the case?
Absolutely. I had somebody report into work today that they were going to one of their family members' funerals.
Oh my gosh.
The hell are you doing here? Because here's things employees should know from an employer. If you can't take your PTO, that means I'm not a good business owner. That means I failed, just straight out. So when you don't take your PTO, you're actually insulting me a little bit. That tells me that I have not built an environment where you can take the rest you need. So the other thing I do is Friday at 5 o'clock, exactly at 5 o'clock, I play Closing Time by Semisonic. So I actually play it on all the televisions and on the overhead in the office. And the rule is you have till the end of closing time to have all of your stuff and be out of the door. You cannot be here at 5:03 when closing time is done.
Well, thanks for getting that in my head and
I know,
everyone
right?
else's
Yeah.
head.
Maybe copyright strike.
I was like, Friday afternoon, turn it up. And no, I don't do it every day because that would be like hearing the Macarena end on it.
Yeah.
But every Friday, just kind of remind people. Every 2 weeks, I sit with managers and I say, hey, show me your PTO schedule. Have they gone on vacation? Have they left here? I don't want 60-hour-a-week workaholics. I want like a badass 40 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I think the listeners would really want to know is like, you talked about this childhood that was rougher, and you were just getting started. You kind of had some wins, but they were kind of downplayed. Like, how did you go from there to two companies? I mean, that seems like, a wild ride.
Yeah. So this isn't healthy, for everybody that's listening. So, part of going through all that is that I have severe imposter syndrome. I still do. I don't feel like I've actually built two companies. I feel like I'm fortunate enough that I hired really good people and then just didn't ruin it for them. I mean, but when, someone asked me today, I saw you're working on something on your laptop. Are you the chief developer of this for your office? I'm like, no. Like, I mean, Virginia is amazing, and Carrie just crushes it in what she does. And then there's Jared and Rick and David and Aaron and Glenn and Brandon and like all of these amazing people. Every single day, whether I want it or not, my natural thought when I wake up is, why are you even going there? Like, they're brilliant. You're not. Right around the time I brush my teeth, I realize that I'm actually okay. Not too bad. I don't answer any emails for the first 45 minutes I'm awake, ever, because I'm just not clear yet. I have to get around that. One trick I learned, though, is I got to work with the United Nations. This is about 8 years ago, give or take. And so as soon as I finished, I remember standing there in front of the wall symbol of the United Nations, and I was just kind of like, how the hell did this happen? And on the way back, I went on Amazon and ordered a United Nations flag, and I hung it like right at the front door of my office. So when I drive in to work and, and I've screwed up and I'm listening to Depeche Mode or maybe I'm listening too much Counting Crows, Omaha, I'm just not feeling it. I go through the door and there's something that just says, but you did that. Yeah. And so that's something that I still have to have. The imposter syndrome led me to build two companies, because when you get up every day thinking that you haven't accomplished anything, you devote every minute of that day to accomplish something, and then you start over the next day. I'm getting a lot better at that, but truly, a lot of what I've done isn't healthy that way. It was just a way that I had to get through.
I was unfortunate. I didn't get to hear the presentation Andy was talking about. He's talked so much about it since that. But one thing I've kind of looked through his notes, and I was seeing some of the slides you shared, and one thing that really stuck out to me was the prioritization chart. Like I think myself, and I think maybe many listeners maybe often struggle with that. Right. Because we have a tendency to kind of like play into everything as being urgent, and how to, so could you talk a little bit about that and how you kind of tackle those things and how do you categorize things and really like, what, where things should fall?
Yeah. So one, I started with the Eisenhower model, and it's a square, and like must be done has like measurable repercussions top left, things that just don't matter on the bottom.
Okay.
And then the other corners are a blend of those two polarities. However, the real way that I did it, that's worked for me, for personal things, and I always put things in ticket trackers because I can't remember anything. So like I can send an email of something to a ticket tracker, and it's just like, and it could be really simple stuff, but getting it onto a ticket tracker and getting out of my head helps. But honestly, the thing that truly helped me, and it took a ton of humility, is the people that I have at these companies. A lot of people say it and they don't mean it. They're your quintessential narcissistic CEO. But when I get in a room with Jared and I say, hey, like, do you got the team? Like, or you've got all the red team stuff, so you don't need me to worry about any of it. And Jared, someone I've known for 10 years, he's like, boss, like, let it go. I got it. We're good. And then I do. And I realize when I let it go that it's so much better than what I was going to ever do with it. The hard thing about growing up that way is you have significant trust issues. Like, even sitting down in a room for a podcast, you sit there and go, is this a real deal, or is it going to be used against me in some way? Like, there's always, it's back here, right? Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of time, to build up a group of people that you really trust. And then when you trust them and you see what they do, you kind of go back, why did I waste 20 years? But really the whole thing, if someone right now wants to try to figure it out, is go grab the Eisenhower model. It's just 4 squares. Be honest, be humble. Like, this has to be done, and then this doesn't. The other thing that's very, very important, and I say it in every talk, is move away from qualitative to quantitative. I know that I struggle with a mental illness that is emotionally driven. My head is not always going to keep things rational. Like we have a significant issue with catastrophizing things when you're manic or bipolar. We also have a lot of cognitive distortion, where you don't see things always the way that they are. So the quicker that you can start measuring things and you can look at the numbers. Like, if I tried to run Critical Path and Leargas, like, post-COVID, like I did pre-COVID, there's no way we could succeed, because I don't see these people all the time anymore. I can't get, like, a gut check of how things are going. So learning to measure things and read the numbers helps me get around my head. That also helps me know what I need to prioritize.
I'm just curious, because that sounds like you could apply that to delegation. I've talked with several people where, they, and especially in your case, you have trust issues. It's hard to delegate when you have trust issues. Right. I guess, can you elaborate on how you decide to delegate something and what you don't, especially being the CEO?
Yeah, it was the easiest thing, and it was the most obvious, and I never thought to do it until Ganjar Aman Sentosa. He was one of the greatest cybersecurity mentors I ever had. I hope he hears this. He was really, really tough. And I would do reports, and they just look like they're just bloody all through. But Ganjar had these standards. And one of the things that Ganjar taught me was, if you're going to lead, be the last person that replies to an email. Now, this is very, very simple. Like, there's a bunch of people on these emails. You hired them because they're really, really good. Be the last person to reply to the email. Now, if you get to, we have this thing where all emails in a given day have to be responded to that day. Mm-hmm. So if I get an email by 5:00, we have to respond to that email at the end of the day. It can be, hey, I'm going to get to this first thing in the morning, but we have to answer it. The minute that I just stopped using my overdeveloped mouse finger, to race to reply to the email, and I let these people just reply, I would read their replies and I would go, holy cow, I didn't even think of looking at that problem that way. But then I realized, they have 40 hours a week to look at that problem. You have 15 minutes. Get out of their way. It was the simplest thing, was just be the last person to go reply to the email. Give them a shot.
That is, honestly, that's hurt me.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking, I definitely struggle with that some, and I've learned. I heard something very similar, but really focused around meetings, which is always be the last person to chime in on the idea. If you're around at the table meeting, let everyone else come in with ideas, because as a leaders, people are watching us, and if we come up with an idea, they're not going to be the first one to be like, oh no, I don't like that one, oh no, I've got a better one per se. Sometimes they'll just say, well, that one's okay enough.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. I mean, and it very much translates from the email role. You're here for a reason, if I go into a meeting and if I jump in the beginning of an email thread before the person that I brought here to do it, what am I telling them? That I brought you here because the higher headcount number in my company makes me feel successful. Mm-hmm. It's not the truth. Like, we're successful because you're smarter than I am, and I got out of your way, and I just make sure you have the tools you need and you're paid. And I just make sure that I adhere to my open door policy, which my open door policy is very, very different than most. Most open door policies are the manager comes in and they leave the door open and you can go in there and speak to them anytime, right? Mm-hmm. Familiar with that one? Mine is different. My open door policy is that every other week I will get up off of my ass and I will walk out of my door and I will go to where that person is sitting and I will look them in the eye and say, how are you? Well, work's really, I didn't ask about work. How are you doing? Mm-hmm. Work's going to be fine if you're fine, because I hired you because you're really, really smart. How are you? Well, I'm good, and I've got some stuff going on. Okay, well, you don't have to tell me all the stuff. I don't want to invade your privacy, but I genuinely care about you. I'm going to get up off of my ass in my chair. I'm going to walk through the door, and I'm going to come to where you are. A good leader doesn't require people to come to them. You already know where your people are. They're enacting your mission. They're executing your goals. Go to them. That's where you change things.
I'm starting to kick myself in the butt just because I'm thinking of some times where I was out of the office and I come back and all these fantastic things happened. I feel like I get out of the way of my folks, but
it's a learning experience.
I'm starting to question that highly, and with the email, I'm 100% the first one to respond. So that's something I need to work on and take home. So anyway, it's very simple, but it definitely says a lot all in the same.
It only took until I was 37. It's okay. I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was thinking we were talking a little bit about some things we might want to ask you, and cybersecurity is such it's a stressful place to be, especially if you're going through an event. I mean, always it is. I think there's the weight of, knowing that something you do or don't do may be like how someone potentially gets in or how you're stopping them. But
it's horrifying.
Yeah. How do you, when you talk to people about this, how do you help them, I guess, de-stress from an environment that's, inherently stressful?
So, one thing that I share at the office is that, it's going to be okay because there is no choice. It's going to be fine. The best incident responders are the ones that go into a room and they're just calm. I know it's terrible. I know this data is out there. I know it's impacted. I know this is going to be a real struggle, but it will be okay. It may not be the version of the okay that we want, but and I think this is just a lot of being my age at this point. Like, the 40s are easily the greatest years of my life because I've already experienced almost all of it. I've been through a pandemic, I've been through a war, I've been through abuse, I've lost family members, I've gotten married, I've had kids, I've made money, I've lost all my money, I've made money. I've had, a giant home, then I lived in the front seat of a Ford Ranger on parking decks, and then I rebuilt my life. And when you go through things, you realize deeply internally that it's going to be okay. The thing that leaders have to know with new people is that they're looking to you to find out how they should respond. If you're calm, they're going to be calm. If you're crazy and you're running around, and I have been the crazy running around guy, this is not initial form. This is many iterations of Patrick Kelley, but you just learn that it's going to be okay. You also remove the stigma of making mistakes. I mean, we're human. I really don't mind when my people make mistakes. I really don't mind when they make big mistakes. The issue I have is when they try to hide mistakes, when they won't just own that the mistake happened. Because here's what I know. Most of my life, I was a screw up. Right? Most of my life, I got it wrong. Now maybe if the choices had been different, I would have made a different decision, right? But I was a screw up. So when I have young folks come through, I'm like, I know you're going to screw up. But the quicker that you realize that that's okay, the faster that we can get started on making it better and making you better. So like, to the guy that caused the CrowdStrike thing, hey dude, you're going to be all right. I've crashed a lot of stuff. I just didn't have 8.5 million people that were using it at the time. But if you're having an issue getting hired, give me a call. I'd much rather have people that know how to kind of come out of the ashes than those that don't.
Yeah.
So
if you're hard on someone that's making a mistake, that's when you're going to find people that are going to hide stuff, which is the worst possible scenario. So I think, obviously you don't want repeat offenders, but, I think it's important to let people learn from their mistake.
So you have to have realistic expectations that you place on people too. Like I have this great guy that just started. His name is Wes, and oh my gosh, he is so smart. He literally just turned 21 last week, and he is brilliant. But I went to him when he first got there, and I said, part of you being here is I'm going to invest in you. No, he's not an intern. He's an employee. I said, do you want to take the donkey, the train, or the airplane? How fast do you want to go? I'm okay. Any of the choices you make. But you have to give people the opportunity to kind of accept the expectations you put on them. Now, if you're constantly throwing somebody into catastrophic situations, you're not a good leader. There's something else that we do at my companies that's a little bit different, and it's that I won't allow my managers to hire a person until they accept a debt. And this is a little different. But say Stacy came to me and Stacy said, hey, I want to hire Wes. I'm like, that's great. Now, here's the thing. If you hire Wes, you take on a debt. And that debt is that he has to be returned back to the workforce better than you got him. Now, we want everyone to be here forever. And should Wes leave the company, he doesn't have to leave happy. Not everybody leaves happy. Some people are going to go to Glassdoor and they're going to say all sorts of things about you. But are they better when they left? Did you invest the time? This is where mentoring and menting comes into play. It's just like hiring new people. Don't hire a whole lot of people that restrict your ability to learn them, to understand their capabilities, and set reasonable expectations so that they don't fall on their face over and over again. If you keep pushing people into the deep end of the pool, they're going to leave the pool. So, a lot of it is, and if you're going to be a leader and you've been in the industry this long, you should know how to set those expectations.
Something I was thinking about, especially in the cooperative space, but in a lot of spaces, small, medium business, a lot of times there's, kind of the one or two people that are working through, the technology woes that are over cybersecurity or kind of responsible for making sure no one gets in, which, in itself is pretty stressful, but like if you could talk to every one of those guys or gals, and like what would you tell them? Like, one, how would you tell them to kind of approach it mentally? But also, if you were giving them cyber advice, like where would you tell them to start? Like where would how would you kind of lead them to that first step?
Yeah. So there's an ebook out there that's free to download. It's the first 90 days as a CTO. Any advice that's in there for a CTO actually applies directly to someone that's just starting. The first thing you want to do is talk to the people around you. Talk to the people that are there. If by chance you can speak to the predecessor that was in a position for you got there, speak to them. What went good? What went bad? Why are you leaving? There's a lot of reasons that people leave that are not a negative reflection on a company. Maybe they're just growing at a velocity that's faster than the company can provide those opportunities, right? So the first thing you have to do is you have to go ask a lot of questions. because you can't really secure what you don't know. And at the end of the day, if you're one or two people, you're going to be relying on all of those people, to be able to initiate and to execute your plans. So the first thing I say is go talk to people. The other is go get a model. There's a lot of free models. I'll give someone a free model, that's broken out into like, here's what I'm going to do in the first quarter. This is what I'm going to do. And it starts with the basics. Like, what do I have? Do I have 35 Windows 10 machines? Do I have some XP in the corner? Like, you have to know what you have. The other things that you need to understand is that cybersecurity is not a technical problem. We really confuse that. Cybersecurity is an administrative problem that we use technical controls to address. We don't fix cybersecurity with firewalls. We have programs that we put in place that firewalls are one of the tools that we use. But cyber is not a technical problem. We always confuse that. The other thing is just starting at the basics and making sure that you have just two-factor authentication. Like, don't race out to grab everything that has AI on it if you haven't figured out two-factor authentication. Lastly is consolidation. Like I just said in the last talk, that the average lifespan of a cybersecurity person in an EMC right now is 17 to 18 months. So if you have 20 controls, that means if you focused on becoming proficient at one of them per month, you're never going to get to the end of it before you leave. So consolidate.
Sorry,
Yeah.
maybe I'm a little dense. Can you elaborate more on consolidation and exactly what you mean with that?
Yeah, so a lot of environments I'll go into, they have Office 365 and they have Barracuda for spam filtering, and they have Duo or they have Okta. Then they're going to have an endpoint solution like SentinelOne, but they're also going to be deploying Defender using Microsoft. But they don't have their logs going anywhere. Well, so what if we just use the spam filtering that's part of Office 365 and we use Microsoft Authenticator, and maybe we start out with Microsoft Defender as the AV solution? It's really not that bad anymore. Why don't we start there, like in that one platform with that one source of data? And then we can take the money that we're spending on all these other things. Now, all those other things are really good. Like, they are great people. Like, Doug Song crushed it when he created Duo, and he's a super good guy. But why don't we use the money to go get a SIM, and then we get some logs into it? So if something happens, we can go and see what was going on. And then why don't we use some of that money to have someone help us draft some policies and procedures? Now, something that we can use ChatGPT for today, which is, like, to me is a no-brainer. Like, go to ChatGPT and say, write me a deployment run guide for Microsoft Defender. My company's name is Company X, all one word. Okay? So we get this whole run guide to do this whole thing, and you can give this to other people to run around and do this work. Now, there's a run guide.
Yeah.
And you can just find and replace Company X with critical path security. Okay, well, instead of sitting down and going through all the documentation, you just wrote a run guide.
Yeah.
So now you can hand that to an intern from the community college, and you can do this with all of it. I think we just have to do what EMCs are really good at, which is be creative.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just because you mentioned run guides, I was sitting at a conference that they were talking about. They were talking about incident response, but they were talking about all the playbooks. And I was just wondering, do you have any experience with playbooks, and can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so again, the talk I was just in, I told everyone in the room that if they didn't have an incident response plan that had playbooks in it, just send me an email. I'll give you one. I've got a template.
Okay.
You can, if all you've got time to do is just update the email addresses, the phone numbers, and find and replace Company X with your name, you'll at least have an incident response plan that has playbooks. The playbooks they're so important. When I go into an environment on an IR, even if they have an incident response plan in place, if they don't have playbooks, everyone is losing their mind. And here's the hard part is we don't respond right without playbooks. Like we were like, okay, everything's on fire, the world's ending, what's going to happen? I guess we should just go unplug everything. Well, it might make it worse. The playbooks I have actually go through the first 24 hours of the event. Like, this is who you call. This is what you say to the people when you call. Because I don't expect what's between your two ears to work properly, at least for the first 8 hours. Like, it's not. Even for incident responders, when we go in, have to understand that, like, we go into an environment and we have an hour, to understand this environment. What job have you ever worked where you understood the environment in even 30 days? We have an hour. So where do we go? We go back to the playbooks. Okay, call, and here's where most people, this is where we get it wrong. I'm going to be very opinionated about this. On most of the instant response playbooks that I read, it starts with call legal, call the insurance company. No. Call HR. Find out if payroll is already scheduled for next week. Ask if payroll is scheduled for the week after. To me, that's the most important thing you're going to do. I need every single person that works here to stay here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're not going to survive. If they're not going to get paid, they're not going to stay. And I have another resource walking right out the door. And whatever is in that person's head, I don't have it anymore. So, and you don't have to tell them that you're in an incident, but just call and ask a question. Is payroll scheduled for the week? Great. Call legal. But the most important thing that you can ever do in an incident response is make sure that you're going to hit payroll. You're going to need the people. You don't want them running out. You don't want them going to news vans and giving an opinion or giving a version of the story that isn't true. A lot that goes into incident response is knowing how to properly say the truth. Only say what is factual and true. Don't elaborate. Don't get emotional. That's where, like, the BP CEO totally screwed it up. When we had the Deepwater Horizon, when it exploded out in the bay. Yeah, my family is in the bay. And here's this guy, and I've got friends that are wondering if their friends are going to come home. They're body of the ocean, and here's this guy get on front of a microphone and go, I can't wait till this is over. I've not slept in days.
Does not work well with people watching.
So my playbooks actually tell you what to say so that you don't get on, television and become a total muppet because you lose the ability to make good decisions.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. I'll put Tanner on the spot. Like, how large is your incident response? How many pages is it?
Let's see. I would. It's not 300 because I know Patrick talked about.
It's a big incident response plan.
Yeah, I would say. I don't know. I'm gonna say 15 to 20.
That's what
something like that. I would going through a third party incident pretty recently within the last year. And actually, I'm giving a little a talk tomorrow at the conference about that and kind of lessons we learned. I would 100% agree with you. There's a tendency, even with the plan, we had a plan in place from day one. The tendency was to immediately not look at the plan and just to kind of make decisions on the fly. And that's one of our lessons out of that was one, we have to force yourself to look at it, but two, having more pre-built scenarios instead of a generalized plan that does cover those things, but doesn't give you necessarily step by step in every incident, because that really just led us to making a lot of off the cuff decisions,
right?
Which worked out. It wasn't an active incident. It was a vendor third party data incident, but I had a feeling if we had an active incident that it would have not gone as well as I would have liked.
Yeah. So you brought some things up there of having to make decisions off the cuff, and then you've got leadership that's coming to you and they're demanding answers, right? And they're quite often calling shots too. So here's something that I have in our contracts, and actually have it in our playbooks. We define who the incident commander is. The incident commander is defined in the playbook before the event happens. What the incident commander has the power to do is override the CEO. you're not running this incident. You cannot emotionally run this incident. There's no way you can be impartial. And no one goes into it with bad intentions. But it's a really hard situation. And if you're the owner of the company, or you're the founder, or if you invested 10 years of your life into building this thing, there's no way that you can go into that situation and be objective. It just doesn't work. So having an incident commander defined that, sure, he's going to listen to the concerns. Like, he's not going to go, rogue and wild, wild west, but he's going to have the power contractually to go to the CEO and say, we are not going to just go and push out a press release. We don't know what we're even doing yet. Mm-hmm. Even though data privacy laws say that we have 24 hours to report, we're not going to have a clue in 24 hours what the scope of this is. Someone has to have the ability to go in knowing what it's like to go through these, because it's hard. Like, Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until he gets punched in the face. That pretty much defines an incident response.
That's something I have concern with is, most organizations, but co-ops, we pride ourselves in being transparent, and not saying that if you had an incident, clearly we're going to want to be truthful and transparent, but you can definitely overshare mm-hmm. and get yourself in trouble. I guess, is there any thoughts or tips for whoever would be communicating to the public for an incident, or is that something worth paying someone for?
Yeah, it actually is. There are some groups that are very good at crisis communications. If you don't know how, it's really good to find those people.
Okay.
Also, talk to legal, because legal knows what you're permitted to say and what you aren't. Mm-hmm. There's some sort of a misunderstanding that when a company doesn't go full transparent out of the gate, that they, are trying to hide something. The issue with not being fully transparent is that, do you even know what you're sharing? Mm-hmm. Do you even know if this is right? To me, it's kind of like my niece coming to me a couple of weeks ago and say, I'm on TikTok because I want to be an influencer. Well, what do you want to influence? Well, what do you mean? What have you learned? What have you become so good at that you want to go influence? Because you're going to go influence people. You're going to share things.
Yeah.
I looked at her and said, wouldn't it be better if you knew the topic that you want to influence people about and you actually led it in the right direction? Crisis communications are much that way. You don't want to overshare if what you're oversharing is wrong. You want to share things that are factually true. You don't want to hold facts back. But another thing that I won't do is I don't make assumptions. Was this a nation state? I don't know. Did it impact everything? I don't know. Well, whose data was it? I'm not sure yet. What I know is that there was an event 4 hours ago, and I got 32 jokers over here that are going crazy figuring all this out. And when I know more, I'll share more. But don't lead the conversation in a direction when you don't need to.
Yeah.
I would just say I wholeheartedly agree with that. As we went through the incident, one thing I found, especially, and it goes right along with what you were just saying, is that it was evolving as it went. And so early on, I kind of made some statements where it was like, we found this data. Well, we did, and then we found some other data. And so I think, kind of to your point, when you go and you just go ahead and fully share early, it almost looks like you're less competent of the situation in a way, because you kind of say, well, this is all that we have. Oh, no, wait, there's a little bit more. Oh, no, wait, there's a little bit more. And people, I think, it erodes the confidence, at least. And that's something I felt like I learned out of that incident too. And it goes right along with that.
Yeah, media is going to push for answers. And I love the reporters that I work with, but even the reporters have a job of getting as much information as possible. You just, a good crisis communicator is comfortable in saying, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought you might just want to talk a little bit about Critical Path and Leargas and kind of talk about what they do, and kind of like what are their next steps. What's the future look like for both of those, and who you're serving, and you know, the technology that you're using, all those kinds of things.
Sure. I wasn't prepared for these questions, so I'm going to bring these right off the cuff. I'm the world's worst salesperson. But Critical Path is a professional services company that does fractional CISO, helps companies with regulatory compliance, pen testing, fully managed SOC is something that we spend a lot of time doing for customers. Leargas is a platform that we use. I found a few years into Critical Path that the platform could just go in some directions that Critical Path may not. So Leargas was spun out, and there's a group. It provides like that XDR platform that pulls everything and glues it together, everything from the substation to the 365 accounts. The reason why we did it and who we serve is deeply passionate to me. I am 100% entrenched in the EMC community. I love EMCs and co-ops. I feel like they are by far the most underserved market that we have right now. We have a lot of really good solutions that are out there, and I'm not going to name shame anyone, but anyone that has worked at an EMC or a co-op, they know that we don't have the budget to go spend, $8,000 a month on a single control. Like we just don't have that kind of money. If you're doing $8,000 a month, you're looking at almost $100,000 a year just for one thing, and that just doesn't work. So the whole goal with Leargas was that we were going to develop a platform that would do 95% of what everyone else does, but I can sell the whole thing at something that truly fits inside the budget of an EMC. I have the great fortune right now that I don't have outside investors. So as long as the company is profitable, I'm able to give all of those things to an EMC and a co-op at a price that fits. It's very, very important. I grew up in rural North Georgia. I've lived on EMCs for my entire life, save for like 4 years out of Southern California. My entire world has been built on EMCs. So our services on Critical Path and Leargas are specifically built to go in that direction.
This is, I think in the rest of the world, that the virtual CISO is kind of a well-known term, but I don't see that in the co-op industry. I guess for our folks listening, can you just kind of touch on what a virtual CISO is and what that looks like?
Yeah, of course. So let's start with the CISO, and then we can talk about the V part of it. So a CISO is your Chief Information Security Officer. Their job is typically to help manage risk as it relates to information technology, MIS, right? A CISO will quite often work with legal to understand regulatory compliance. Mm-hmm. We spend quite a bit of time working with the compliance department around, are we doing the things that we're supposed to be doing the way that we're supposed to be doing it? CISOs now spend a whole lot of time in data privacy too, and understanding like what is the threshold that something becomes a reportable event. I get quite a bit of that. A CISO is going to help build direction and roadmap and budgeting. All of those things are part of it. The issue with a CISO is that good CISOs are quite rare, and they're very expensive. I think I was looking the other day, and the average salary of a CISO is somewhere between like $225,000 and $300,000 a year on average. You've got some $100,000 accidental CISOs that were like doing sysadmin, and this like the CISO just became part of their job. And then you've got the folks that are bringing down $5 million a year, right? The EMCs really cannot afford to spend $1 million in cybersecurity controls and then spend $500,000 on a CISO. So the whole thing that I do with vCISO, which is virtual/fractional CISO, is that most EMCs do not need me there for 40 hours a week. Mm-hmm. most of the time 2 or 3 hours a week is closer to what they really need. So getting a CISO for 10 hours a month or 12 hours a month is significantly less costly, than putting somebody at the end of the hallway. The other thing is that EMCs are complex, but they're not as complex from a regulatory point of view as they will be in the very near future. So you can get a good CISO, like maybe not a great CISO, but you can get one that's really good, for a price that really fits properly. And now a lot of the regulatory requirements require that you have someone that's in that role, for having insurance, for processing payments, like all that stuff. So it's also a way to transfer some of the risk as well. And that's effectively what it does. If I were to give someone advice, if they're trying to be a vCISO, don't do more than a handful of customers at a time. There's this big push of like, go collect them all. But it's really, really hard, like to truly get entrenched in an organization and be able to operate at that level. So, if you spread yourself really, really thin, you're not going to make the impact that you hope to make.
I think it's an interesting concept. I'm really hoping that concept takes off, just because, I mean, I consider our co-op kind of on a smaller side, but in North Carolina, we might be on the smaller side at 35,000 meters. But across the nation, we're a lot larger, and you're talking about the CISO salaries. I mean, that's more than most CEOs are making at most co-ops.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's no way that they can bite off on, having that qualified individual. So I think it's a interesting concept, and I think that's something a lot of us should look at.
I think all of cybersecurity has really got to look at it differently. We really have to spend more time focusing on the impact we're trying to make and not on what the revenue points are. Like, I love making money, and hey, all shareholders and folks that are invested in my companies, it's not that I don't care about total contract value and how it aligns with the customer acquisition cost, and that I'm not looking at what the period change is from last year to this year on ARR. Yeah, it matters. Like that's all very important. But if you're leading by line item, like if you're going into an organization, we are really bad at it here in EMC space. If you're leading an EMC on what they should do based on what you can sell them, you've done it wrong. If you went to RSA or you went to Black Hat last week and you saw a really, really good talk about something, and 1 week later you're trying to sell that to every EMC, you're doing a disservice. Stop doing that. There's no way in 1 week that you have truly gone through that product and you understand exactly how it fits in this space. If you're leading by line item, you're doing it wrong. I just feel like us as vendors, we really have to understand that, do you want to get rich or do you want to fix something? And act accordingly.
So, cybersecurity is a struggle for EMCs, and there's a lot of vendors out there. I guess, what advice do you have for people in our positions when we're looking at working at partnering with someone? Because all of us pretty much have to partner with someone. But what suggestions do you have for us in figuring out what to look for?
For me, it's always how the prospective vendor approaches the conversation with me. Like, that's very important. It's going to sound strange, but I want a vendor that will come in and ask me a lot of questions, and then I want to watch them record my answers. If someone walks into the room and says, hey, I've got this thing and you need to buy it because this is the problem that you have no idea what problems I have. As vendors, we have this thing about wanting to define the problem that our customers are having by the problem that we know how to solve, instead of having the guts to listen to the customers and go and solve the problem that they're really having. So you want to make sure that when you go talk to a partner that they listen. And it's not that I want to lock new folks out, because I was a new folk one time too. But it doesn't hurt to ask around to other EMCs and just say, hey, what was your experience? I actually really like for potential customers to reach out to my other customers. And I want them to ask them, like, what's bad about them? I know it's a terrible way to lead off as a salesperson, but I want to know, like, what did they do wrong? What could they do better? I want my customers to answer that and then answer what I do right. But something I told somebody the other day is I've never learned much by someone that just points out everything that I do right.
Yeah.
I learn from people that challenge me. So I think what you have to do first out when you're looking at vendors is, are they really here to solve my problems? Are they really willing to invest the time to know who we are? And if they're not, finish buying lunch and send them out.
I don't know that I've had too many vendors write down anything.
Yeah, I
Or
mean,
ask
well,
about-
I don't know. It's all virtual meetings now, so
Yeah.
sometimes it's tough to see. But
Yeah, I really struggle with that. I actually have an example from today that's pretty interesting. So we will start working with someone without physically meeting them. But as soon as you sign a contract, I'm buying a plane ticket. Like I don't feel like a relationship starts until I see you. Somebody at my organization has to see you in person. If you don't want to see us, okay. But to me, I'm still old school. Right? If I'm going to defend your company, if I'm going to be there when things go terrible, could we at least not shake hands first? Mm-hmm. So I think that's super important. Today in the parking lot, I hired somebody, like right here in the parking lot of the event today. There's this amazing person. His name is Storm, and we have been talking back and forth for 3 or 4 months. And I really wanted to hire him. But one of my rules is that if I'm going to accept the debt that we talked about earlier, then I have to meet you. I got to shake your hand. I got to look you in the eye because I just took on a debt by hiring you. I have to make the commitment, just me to you as a person, that I'm going to invest the time to make you successful at my company, but I'm going to make sure that you're successful at the next company. So I said, hey, I'm going to be in Wilmington. I'm going to be in Wilmington for 26 hours. I'm literally here for 26 hours before I go to Ottawa and Saskatoon. And so I'm going to be there, and I really want to hire you. And I have an offer letter in my rucksack. Would you drive to Wilmington? He said, it's like an hour. And he's like, yeah, I'm there. So honest to goodness, Storm drove over today, pulled up right outside the convention center, didn't have a badge. Gave him a little static of being here in the hallways without a badge. So we went out there to the river that has the little stools.
Yeah.
And we signed an offer letter, and he started working today at 2:00. That's the thing. It's, meet somebody, know them, let them know who you are, build a relationship, and then go. Because otherwise, when everything's on fire and the internet connection is down, do you really want to be doing instant response over Zoom?
Absolutely not.
no.
It's like the Brady Bunch of doom. It's like all these photos and everybody's like, he started drinking. He's having an existential crisis.
Yeah, the last thing I'd want to do is be on a Zoom call.
No.
Yeah, Patrick, we really appreciate having you on today. I think you shared a lot, just a lot of great takeaways. I hope our listeners will agree. But both on the mental health and just some general cybersecurity things, and we all need extra help. We're constantly trying to learn, as you mentioned. You want to never stop learning. But again, just appreciate having you on.
Thank you. It's an honor.
All right. So I just want to thank all the listeners. Without you guys listening, we don't have a reason to do a podcast, and we just really appreciate each of you. If you're whatever platform you're listening on, if you haven't subscribed to us, please subscribe and click the notifications so you'll be alerted when we put out new episodes. And you can always follow us on all of the social media platforms. And if you have any episode ideas or any feedback for us, please email us at show@offthewiredpodcast.com. Great episode today. Really appreciate
Thank you.
just the conversation. And this is Off the Wire with another episode.